People are going to go, that's not right. Don't, you shouldn't take it personal. I say bullshit. I say if you're going to be a homicide detective, take it personal and invest.
If it wasn't for him, Maddie'd be still out in that unmarked grave that we found him.
I've lost my little boy,
William Tyrrell.
Who vanished near his grandmother's Kendall home more than 3.5 years ago.
If I didn't think I was the right person for the job, I would have readily put my hand up and say, hey, but that wasn't the case.
I was taken off the investigations and I could no longer continue to support victims and lock up the bad guys.
I had to be escorted in. I felt like Hannibal Lecter. It was ridiculous.
Gary Jubelin, thank you for joining me.
Oh.
Thanks for confirming your name.
Yeah, well, thanks very much.
That is who you are.
That is who I am.
So tell me, you joined the cops.
Yeah.
It's 1985.
Yeah.
How old are you then?
I was 22.
And it wasn't your first career choice, was it?
No, it wasn't. I didn't grow up wanting to be a cop. I was actually, I felt, and I say it, fell into the building trade because my father was involved in the building trade and it just seemed like something natural that I'd do. And I was on a building site. I was an electrician working as an electrician. It was a particularly tough day crawling through ceilings, and I was having lunch in a park and I saw two cops chasing the bad guy down the street. And at that moment, that's when I decided I wanted to join the police.
And you never looked back?
Well, I applied the next day. Literally, it was like this light bulb moment. And the moment I walked into the academy, I thought, yeah, this is for me. I like it. I did 2 years in uniform. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. But an opportunity presented itself. One of the detectives in the local police station where I was working saw something in me and gave me a tap on the shoulder and said, hey, have you ever considered plain clothes? And I sort of said, yeah, I'd love to.
And then you kind of built yourself a name really as being, and I will say it, one of the most definitely the most famous homicide detectives.
Famous or infamous, whatever. Yeah, that'll be subject
Notorious.
to... Yeah, well, let's not go too far, but yeah, subject to people's opinions. And because of the nature of the work I was doing, I was a homicide detective, and because of homicide, the media attention is there, and I'd been doing it for a very long time, and I think some of the cases I had the public's attention, so it sort of evolved from there.
One of the state's most experienced detectives, Gary Jubelin, became a household name after he was portrayed in Underbelly.
Tell me what happened.
Tell me about those first days working in homicide.
When I got to homicide, I was absolutely wrapped. It was like all my dreams had come true.
Is it quite hard to get into?
It was back then. It was very hard to get in, and there was a sort of pecking order, and it was by invitation, and you couldn't just put your hand up and say, hey, I want to be a homicide detective. So you had to prove yourself with the work that you'd done. The work was hard. You needed a certain skill set, and if you didn't have that skill set, there were going to be problems. And homicide is different from other type of policing. I'm not saying harder, easier, or whatever. Each sort of area of policing has its different feel. But the thing about homicide is what you do is going to be scrutinised one way or the other. It'll be scrutinised by the media. The families will always hold you into account. You'll either appear in the Supreme Court because you've charged someone with murder, or you'll appear in the coroner's court. So whatever you do is going to be scrutinised, and that's the pressure that homicide detectives carry.
Do you remember the first murder you ever worked on?
Yeah. The first murder that there was a couple that I involved in the peripheral, but the first one where I was actually put on the case as an investigator was the murder of Eileen Cantlay, and she was an 80-year-old woman, or I think 83 or 84, and she was murdered in a home, and it was a particularly violent, evil type of crime. There was a sexual assault, and I remember when we caught that person, I remember sitting in the interview room with him when he was confessing, and it was quite chilling because he was reliving what happened. And I was working with my first partner in plain clothes at the time, Jim Williams, and I remember we both walked out of that interview room, and it's not a case of sort of high-fiving or celebrating. We just felt drained because we've been sitting with this evil person and had done this horrendous thing. But that was the type of investigation. I got a taste for it. It was something that you could really throw yourself into.
How often is there kind of a gut instinct where you kind of get an idea quite early in the piece of who might be responsible?
Yeah.
Like how much does your gut lead you, and how much is that gut right?
Yeah, and a lot of people ask that, and I think people are fascinated by it. Detectives, do we have this superpower that we can see who's guilty? we'll look at people with suspicion, we'll look at everyone with suspicion. If someone's been murdered, we'll be looking at the person closest to that person to start with. You use your intuition to a degree, but you've got to overlay that with the facts, if that makes sense. Like, I can look at a crime scene and the crime scene will tell me something. If someone's half buried in a park, I'll be thinking that's someone that's panicked. If someone hasn't, if there's been the way the body has been left, that will tell me something. So you use your experience, and not just your experience within policing, your worldly experience, to have a look at what's gone on there. So that might point you in a direction, but you've got to make sure, follow that direction, but you've got to overlay that with the facts. And it's important that you don't create the narrative around your theory. You've got to let the facts speak for themselves. You can have your theory and see how the facts lay out when they're gathered.
I'm assuming you've probably investigated hundreds, thousands of homicides?
It wouldn't be thousands, but it definitely been hundreds. Yeah.
What are kind of the different types of homicides, and what drives the offender?
It's the motivation for homicide can vary greatly, and sometimes it's just escalating violence. It's stupid violence. It's a pub brawl that's just got out of hand, and someone does something stupid. Sexually motivated homicides, you do a lot of those now. Whether that's someone to feed an urge or whatever, is prepared to kill for that. Random type murders. Sometimes a robbery's gone wrong. There was one very early in my career, Barbara Saunders. It was some teenagers that were breaking in the houses and then robbing bottle shops, and then tried to rob Barbara Saunders, and she lost her life there because one of the houses they break into had a gun. And that was just a real tragedy, because I think these kids, if they were, set on the straight and narrow very early, perhaps it wouldn't have happened. But the motives are wide and varied, and sometimes you got some lunatics who I don't think they know why they've killed the person.
Do you think most people are probably capable of committing a murder?
I think what I've seen, given the circumstances, most people have the potential to. I won't put my hand up and say, I could kill someone, but you don't know if the circumstances present themselves. Self-defence is certainly something that I think a lot of people would be capable of killing someone if they were defending themselves or their families. Time and time again, you see murders that have happened where, the husband's left the wife and for another lady, and all of a sudden the wife's died, and the life insurance has been increased 2 weeks before she died, and the husband's shacked up with his new love of his life. It's pretty obvious to see what the motive is there. And it's cowardly, those type of crimes, because it's people that just can't face the truth and just put their hand up and say, look, I'm moving on or whatever. So to avoid that, they actually kill a person. That's quite sad. But all sorts of reasons.
You must get quite emotionally invested in these cases. You'd meet the people, you'd meet the victims' families, you'd probably in some cases be on a daily kind of contact with these people who've lost a loved one. It must be hard to switch off from these jobs.
Well, I don't think you should switch off. Now, people are going to go, that's not right, don't, you shouldn't take it personal. I say bullshit. I say if you're going to be a homicide detective, take it personal and invest. There's plenty of other things you can do in life and do in the police that's not as important as homicide. But if you're a homicide detective, you need to invest. And I always kept, I call it passion with perspective. Like, you keep your professional distance, but people need to be able to trust the person that's responsible for finding out who killed their loved ones. And the relationships I've formed with families of murdered victims, some of them have become my closest friends. Now, people say, well, that's weird, that's wrong. I think it's totally understandable. Other families that I've dealt with, I don't stay in contact because I suspect that I just remind them of the worst time in their life. So I leave the communication between the families up to them, and if they want to reach out, and that, I'm more than happy to speak to them.
If it wasn't for him, Maddie'd be still out in that unmarked grave that we found him.
How often do people give you a surprise confession?
Unfortunately, not very often.
Damn it.
Not often, but people often ask me, how do you get a confession out of someone? And what I've found, and I'm not going to reveal all the bag of tricks, but what I have found that people like to unburden themselves. Now, that might sound strange when you're talking about a murder, but if you think the worst thing you've done in your life, and if you've told your best friend or you told your family or something, it takes the pressure off. And I feel that people that have committed murder are just, they've got this feeling just building up in them. And I've actually seen people that confess and you can still see the weight come off their shoulders because they haven't got this secret hidden anymore. So that's part of it. That it's sometimes they confess because the evidence is overwhelming. There's a whole reason why they confess. Invariably they don't confess and they'll protest their innocence until the day they get sent to jail.
You know the killers, for example, Ivan Milat's one.
Yeah.
Who, obviously was going to die in jail and did.
Yeah.
He was actually quite a frequent letter writer to me.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's amazing the friends you pick up in your life, isn't it?
He used to sign every letter with Ivan Innocent.
Yeah.
What is that about? What do you think that's about?
I think someone like Ivan just trying to stay relevant. And
Right.
yeah, and if you deny something, I've seen people that are killers and they deny it and deny it and deny it to the point where I think they almost actually believe they didn't do it because you just don't concede an inch. I've seen that. So someone like Ivan that might just enjoy the fact that he's got the control. Like if he told people everything he's done, he's got no control. So there's a power element, I would suggest, with Ivan that, look, I've got control. I can tell you if I choose to tell you. If I'm not going to tell you, you're going to have to come back. If he tells us, we might go, oh, see, Ivan.
Yeah, boring.
So, it keeps him relevant, I think.
There's a lot of pressure to solve these cases.
Yeah.
How has that kind of impacted you throughout your career?
There is pressure, especially the high profile ones. Sometimes I felt the weight of the case and think, how do you break through? I was always happy that I never got ahead of my ability. I don't think so. By the time I was leading homicide, I'd been working almost like an apprenticeship under people that before me. By the time I stepped out to actually run an investigation, I was confident that I had all the knowledge and skills that I needed. And like ones like William Tyrrell, obviously a lot of pressure on that one. If I didn't think I was the right person for the job, I would have readily put my hand up and say, hey, I'm out of my depth here. I don't know what I'm doing. But that wasn't the case. The other way I deal with the pressure is if you create a good team. It's amazing how you can spread that pressure around if you've got a team that you can trust. So if you've got a good team that I could bounce an idea off you and you go, Gary, that's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard, that helps because I get your true thoughts on the matter and that helps me. I might come up with an idea and it's ridiculous and you might check me on it. We'll find middle ground and then go forward that way. So that helped me deal with the pressure. Personally, I tried to stay fit. So I would train each day. I'd go to my happy place, which we'd call the gym. And most police stations have a gym. So I'd always find an opportunity to train. And I'd do some yoga and meditation, which I've been doing for years too. And that helped me. And I'd also have a drink, which
also helps.
Yeah, I know you're told not to. But sometimes you just need to chill out and have a beer and talk shit and, with your friends and forget about things for a bit.